Welcome to a video to whom you will not find any books of. The story of a crew the odds are will never fully know, but to see it made an amazing scale and hear the legend of a plane we have clear evidence that flew and later its fate, described all in one video. I hope you enjoy. So what actually is a Gotha? Well, it may be that one plane that you flew while playing Battlefield 1, or maybe even the one you can see get shot down in that one scene from Flyboys. Maybe you even flew it in the game Rise of Flight, but whatever the case, this one was actually flown during the night, and you'll see it in greater detail in the footage next. Luftverkehrsgesellschaft, or LVG for short, try saying that 3 times fast, built Gotha 99116, the Mortas, in which hit a Belgian farmhouse on the night of the 10th or 11th of November. The LVG build differed slightly from the Gotha built G4s. Examples are the propeller guards, controller cable routing, 2 rigging cables on each rudder control horn, and additional struts on the horizontal stabilizers. You may be wondering at this point, what does Mortas actually stand for? It stands for Lieutenant Mons, Lieutenant Roland, and Herman Tosh. Tosh survived the farmhouse crash, but was taken prisoner on May 9, 1918, being the sole survivor of the G5 he was in, shot down over England by a Bristol fighter flown by Lieutenant Turner and Barbois of 141 SQN. Before we conclude on this history segment, I'd like to elaborate a little bit more on the specs of this aircraft. The plane was about 40 feet long with a wingspan of 77 feet 9 inches. Its max weight was 8,042 pounds and had a whopping max speed of 84 miles per hour. 232 of these planes were produced from August 1916 to late 1917. It was powered by 2 Daimler Mercedes D5A 260 horsepower engines, and its flight ceiling was 16,400 feet. The fate of all Gothas, though, is a bit more grim, as none remain intact. All were destroyed per the agreement of the armistice. One may have escaped, though, to Poland, and was reported to have been used by the Polish Air Force.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Trey's Models. In this adventure we're going to do the Wingnut Wings 1/32 scale Gotha G4. Let's start off with the interior, which does have some ejector pin marks to get rid of. The HGW upgrade set does come with metal plates to cover those up. I opted not to use those because of the curvature up in the front, so I did it the old-fashioned way with some perfect plastic filler, and then I came back with some Testor's brown, lightened it up a little bit, based it, sealed that down, then came back with some artist oils to simulate the wood grain. But the seats for the kit are out of the box with the exception of the HGW seatbelt upgrades. They're paper, you do have to cut them out, and also the photo etch buckles that you have to fold the paper through. A little tricky, but worth it in the long run. Then I came back with some dark brown, weathered it with some pastels. Interior continues with the addition of the bulkheads, the internal bomb racks, and also you have to build up the oxygen generators. With the Wingnut wing kits, you really need to remove excess paint on your glue surfaces or you will have fit issues. Okay, we finished up the oxygen generators. They have a canvas looking, for lack of a better word, accumulator bag on the side of them, and painted that with some brown, came back and dry brushed it with some light tan to make it look a little bit more authentic. Also replaced the throttle levers. The ones from Wingnut Wings, although molded nicely, were kind of blobby, so the HWD upgrade stepped in, and I think it's a good improvement. And then onto the instrument panels and the control yokes. They're a combination of plastic and photo etch, and they were hand painted. And then on the wood I came back with a little bit of Tamiya transparent orange to make the wood grain pop a little bit better. Okay, within the kit and the addition of the HGW upgrade, you actually have 3 different options, and I went with a combination of all 3. I didn't like the ammo being photo etched metal because the bullets were actually flat instead of being round, so the plastic was a better option for that, as well as the magazines. The sleeve around the barrel is actually a better way to go. You do have to heat it to anneal it, make it more pliable, bend it around the right size drill bit, it'll slip right over, a little CA glue, you're good to go. For the furniture on the guns, used again some Testor's brown, followed up with some Tamiya transparent orange, give it that nice wood look. Okay, back to finishing up the office. The internal bomb racks are finished up with the bombs in set, seats, oxygen generators in place, gauges on the side over by the pilot's area in place. And also you do have to rig, well, you don't have to. It's an option. You can put the rigging in there, leave it out. You're going to see a lot of the interior on this the way it's open, so I went ahead and did the rigging. Here's where I found an issue, and it was all my fault. The rigging, the lazy way I did it was to put the rigging on the outside of the black framework. What'll happen if you do it that way, when you go to join the fuselage halves up, they will not close properly. You'll have a pretty minor gap, but it's pretty much a pain to deal with. If you're going to rig the interior, keep the rigging on the inside of that outside framework. It'll go together with no problems. Here's a close-up shot of the throttles before they were put in. And here the fuselage halves are joined up after a lot of clamps, a lot of glue. But I did struggle over where I messed up with the rigging and had to come back in and trim some of it out to get the fuselage halves to finally go together. Power plants were next. The valve springs were cut off and replaced with some resin aftermarkets, and also photo etched metal ignition harness, and then came back with I used extreme metal, aluminum and steel on the base, and then came back and weathered it with some Army Painter light tone wash, the quick shade. Worked pretty good. We painted up the cooling systems and the exhaust systems for the engines. Got the pods ready by painting the interior parts of those along with the radiators. And also you have to install the very first of the cabanes. And this is kind of tricky because it really doesn't tell you at what angle to set them. So I lightly glued them at this point so that I could move them fore and aft as I needed to align them. Engines in their pods, and they were closed up with the engine covers and mounted onto the fuse. Fit here is really good. Okay, with the engines and the wing center sections in place, and came back and checked the fit, made sure there wasn't any gaps or anything else that needed attention. There was a very minor filler that was needed, and put on the tail feathers and did a finish sand on it. Okay, this fuselage is not the easiest thing in the world to mask. That probably took more time to mask this than it did to do the pre-shading, but went ahead and base coated it after I masked it with some Testors light gray, thin 50% with thinner. Then did the pre-shade on it, and then came back with my own eye match mix for the purple, I guess purple you could call it, and the it's like a medium sky blue, I guess. Okay, I got the base colors down, sealed them, put the decals on, sealed those as well, then let that sit for a couple of days. Then came back with some artist oils and did my streaking and my color modulation. Okay, after spending countless hours cleaning up the struts, I got those in place and got ready to mount the top wings. Before I did that, I wanted to make sure I had the side rigging done. I used Easy Line for that, colored with a silver Sharpie. This Gotha differs from the Gotha built. This is the LVG built, so the rigging on the side of the fuselage is different. And I'll explain that more on the second video with the English spotter Gotha. On to the dreaded rigging. For this particular build, I tried a new method that I kind of like. This involves drilling everywhere a turnbuckle is going to go. And I should have mentioned this earlier before we get to the painting of the wings, but everywhere a turnbuckle and a strut meet, you drill out all the holes that are there. And they're pre-dimpled, so it makes it easy to find out where the holes are. But I use a micro bit and drill completely through the wing. Once you have the holes drilled, you pull the rigging through from the bottom to the top, secure it at the bottom with some CA glue. I use Foam Safe Thin. Hit it with some kicker, and then pull it through the top. Grab a set of hemostats, attach that to the line, let them free hang, and that'll put enough tension on the line where you can CA the top and hit it with some kicker, and then trim it off with the sharp number 11 blade. Should have mentioned it sooner, but this is the rigging thread that I use. You can find it at Michael's or Joann's Fabrics. And for the turnbuckles, I use the gas patch. And I used a mix of metal and resin gas patch turnbuckles. Used the resin ones in the harder to reach places, and the metal ones in the more visible places. Also, if I had to do it all over again, I would have added this internal rigging on the cabanes before I attached the top wings. Getting those upper turnbuckles onto those cabanes at the top aft wing is a nightmare. I worked the rigging from the inboard to the outboard. That seemed to work best. One of the reasons why I did the rigging this way with the drilling through the wing was to get the turnbuckles perfectly aligned at the correct angle with the rigging. In the past, I've struggled with that. This seems to be a good fix. What I did was I actually took the turnbuckle after the rigging was in place and used some PVA glue, inserted the end of the turnbuckle into the hole, and then glued it right to the rigging. Then I came back with some silver paint on a fine brush and just continued the rigging around the end of the turnbuckle to give it the illusion that it went through the turnbuckle. And it seems to work that way for me. If you guys have a different approach that you think works better, I would love to hear it down in the comments. Okay, after all the primary rigging's in place, you can go back and start concentrating on the aileron rigging. You could be forgiven if you just wanted to use one solid line coming out of this bell crank for the ailerons. I went ahead and went with the two. I took a toothpick after I had the lines in place and separated them, because you have a set of turnbuckles midway between the engine nacelle and the side of the fuselage. I recreated this with some PVA glue, and when that dried I came back and painted it black. What they did on the full-scale aircraft was they covered these turnbuckles in a kind of a tar type material so that they would slide over each other without snagging. Crude but effective. On to the bomb racks, and the ones that go in the center section of the fuselage are a bit fiddly to put together. Take your time, use sharp blades, and you won't have that much of an issue cutting things away. Cleanup is a little bit difficult because of the small parts. Once the racks are in, CA glued the bombs on, put them up underneath. This is a fictional bomb load. I couldn't find any documentation that said that any Gotha carried this many at one time. I just like the way it looked on this one. Landing gear's up next. For the tail skid, I took a razor saw and scraped along the side to impress some wood grain into it, and came back with some brown, followed by some Tamiya transparent orange. Then onto the actual main gear. The plates that at first I thought were some kind of steps, what they actually are is a mud flap, basically, to keep debris from going up into the props and destroying the props and causing an aircraft to be lost. Guess how they figured that out. And Wingnut Wings is nice enough to give you two different sets of wheels. One that are weighted, so the aircraft looks like it's sitting on the ground, and one that are completely round in case, for whatever crazy reason, you wanted to hang one from a ceiling and do it in flight. And a shot of the gear before final assembly. There is some rigging that actually goes onto that after it's placed on the bottom of the aircraft. And then onto the props, what I did was I based them with a light tan, took some Tamiya tape and a straight edge and a sharp knife, cut thin strips, applied those, and then came back with a darker brown. After that I pulled the mask and then came back with some Tamiya transparent orange and then gloss coated them. Then placed the hubs on the back side, painted the front sides, and installed them. Now my apologies for a little out of sequence here, but this is the tail feathers in the rack after I put the control horns on. And then the bomb load out in their racks before final assembly. Then the landing gear, and in this last one on the bottom right you can see the rigging. Okay, just under a year in this build, and this is the last shot before I put all the fiddly bits on, the guns and whatnot. Kept the weathering really light. I wanted to kind of concentrate on the scheme itself and not dirty it up too much. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope it was informative. If you have anything you'd like to add, please don't hesitate to put it in the comments. I'd love to hear from you guys. And again, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, and Happy New Year.